My name is Travis, and I used to have it all: a home, a career, a wife I trusted, and a family I thought would stand by me. But when she filed for divorce, everything crumbled. She cried in court, painting me as the villain, and the judge bought every word. She walked away with the house, my car, most of my savings, and the support of my own family, who said I never deserved her. Before we delve in, tell me if you've ever been ignored by family. Share it in the comment. Drop a like and subscribe to our channel to support us. Now, let's go. I always believed that doing the right thing would protect me, that if I loved hard, worked honestly, and stayed faithful, the world would reward me for it. But life isn't built on fairness. It's built on leverage. And in that courtroom, I had none. My name is Travis Hart. I used to run a modest real estate firm, had a wife named Lena who smiled in public and calculated in private, and a family I helped every step of the way. I was the man everyone called when they needed something. Until they didn't. The divorce came out of nowhere, at least for me. One minute we were discussing vacation plans, and the next, she was handing me papers with a blank stare and no explanation. I kept asking what I did wrong, what had changed. But Lena had no interest in talking. She had a plan, and by the time I realized it, the damage was already done. She moved out with help from her brother, a smug personal trainer who always treated me like an intruder in their family. Within a week, she filed for alimony, property division, and even claimed emotional abuse, none of which was true. But truth doesn't always matter in court. Lena came armed with tears and carefully chosen text screenshots that made me look like a controlling husband. She had her family sitting front row, nodding at every lie she told. But what broke me the most wasn't her performance. It was the moment I saw my father and sister sitting beside her, not me. The same sister I once gave a down payment for her car. The same father whose debts I secretly paid off just 3 years ago. They didn't even look at me. The judge gave her everything. The house, the car, half of my business's cash reserves. Even the dog, Max, who used to sleep curled at my feet. I left the courthouse with a trash bag of personal items and a stomach full of nausea. I didn't cry, not in front of them. I just walked out and kept walking, like if I didn't stop moving, the weight wouldn't crush me. That night, I checked into a cheap motel off the highway. Room smelled like bleach and regret. I stared at the ceiling fan until the sun came up. 3 days passed. I called my mother, no answer. Called my sister, voicemail. Even my closest friend, Derek, said, "Man, maybe it's time you stop blaming everyone." That's when it hit me. Lena didn't just take my possessions, she took my reputation. She had painted me into something I never was, and the people I once trusted had swallowed every stroke of it. I was alone, broke, and bitter. The motel rent was due in 2 days, and my accounts were nearly empty. Then came the ticket. It was early morning, and I went to grab a coffee from the motel vending machine. I'd been to pick up a quarter someone had dropped, and stuck under the machine was a crumpled lottery ticket, torn at the edge but intact. I almost tossed it. I didn't play the lottery. I didn't believe in luck. But something told me to keep it. That afternoon, just for the hell of it, I stopped by a gas station and handed the ticket to the clerk. She scanned it, blinked, then looked up at me like I'd grown a third eye. "Sir, you need to call the state office. This one's a big win." I laughed. "What's big?" She turned the screen toward me. $38 million. For a moment, everything stopped. My ears rang. My heart felt like it had skipped a beat, or maybe 2. I walked out of that gas station with shaking hands and a burning thought in my chest. No one can know. Not yet. And just like that, the man they broke was no longer broken. But I didn't want justice. I wanted something colder. Something they'd never see coming. I walked out of that gas station holding a secret no one could pry from me. Not the court, not Lena, not even God himself if he sent an angel down to ask. $38 million. Enough to buy back every piece of dignity that had been stripped from me, and then some. But I wasn't about to make the same mistake twice. I didn't scream. I didn't celebrate. I didn't even smile. I just slipped the printed claim slip into my wallet, walked straight back to the motel, and locked the door behind me like I was guarding a life raft in a storm. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay on the thin mattress staring at the ceiling, the roar of truck engines outside my window mixing with the whirlwind in my mind. I didn't want revenge, not the petty kind. I didn't want to yell or throw things or show up in court with a smirk and a checkbook. No, I wanted to vanish. Completely. Then rebuild from the ground up and return, not as the Travis they kicked when he was down, but as the man who now owned everything beneath their feet without them even knowing. I used the last $43 in my checking account to rent a car. Not a flashy one. Just a gray Toyota Corolla, something forgettable, something that wouldn't turn heads. I drove 6 hours north to a small rural town near the border, where I checked into another motel under a different name. For the first time in my life, I was anonymous, and I liked it. I made the lottery claim from that town, registered the winnings under an LLC I formed through a lawyer I paid in cash. I didn't even use my real address. By the time the money hit, I had already disappeared from every database that mattered. Then the phone call started. My sister, my dad, even Derek. At first, they called out of curiosity. Then the tone shifted. Guilt. Concern. Where are you staying? We haven't heard from you. We just want to talk. I knew better. Lena must have told them I'd gone off the rails, and now they were worried. Not about me, but about what damage I might cause. That's what happens when the scapegoat slips the leash. He becomes unpredictable, dangerous. I let the calls go unanswered. I didn't know them explanations. Not after the way they clapped for her in court while I sat there bleeding out. Meanwhile, Lena's new life bloomed in full color on social media. She was flaunting her healing journey, moving into what used to be my house, redecorating it like the past never happened. Pictures of her with her trainer brother, wine nights with my sister, spa days with her mother, all of them smiling like they hadn't just helped bury a man alive. I saved the pictures, every single one. Not out of bitterness, but as blueprints for what I was about to destroy quietly, completely, and without warning. I started investing under the radar. Real estate, commercial properties, silent partnerships. All through shell companies, all distant from my name. I bought out a salon that Lena's cousin had just leased. Waited 3 months. Then closed it without notice. Bought a gym franchise, then terminated the location where her brother worked as a personal trainer. I offered no reason. Just paperwork and silence. The ripple started to spread. My father's side hustle, an auto parts supply shop he'd started with help from a new investor. Yeah, that was me. I pulled the funding 6 months in. They went bankrupt within 2. All of them began to feel it. But none of them knew it was me. That was the beauty of it. They had built a version of Travis in their minds. The loser, the liar, the mistake. They never imagined I could be the man behind the curtain. One afternoon, I got a message from Lena. Just checking in. Hope you're okay. Everyone's worried. It was the first time she'd contacted me since the day she watched the judge hand her everything. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Because by then, her new car had already been repossessed quietly. The luxury lease company? One of mine now. I made sure her payment adjustment expired the week after she missed one. Her credit? Already circling the drain. I wasn't just erasing their comfort. I was rewriting the map entirely. But this wasn't about pettiness. It was about balance. They had laughed when I was stripped bare in that courtroom. Now, they would lose pieces of themselves slowly until they finally asked, who did this? And when they did, they'd already be too far gone to stop me. Power is a strange thing. When you don't have it, you feel every door slam, every cold shoulder, every lie weaponized against you. But when you do have it, and no one knows, that's when it becomes art. I watched quietly as they all unraveled, piece by piece, caught in storms they couldn't trace. Lena, my ex-wife, had built her post-divorce life like a castle, wine brunches, yoga retreats, girls' trips. I watched it all collapse from a penthouse I never told anyone I owned. And the best part? She didn't even know which string had been pulled. That was the point. By the 3rd month, Lena had lost 2 of her brand deals. She blamed algorithm changes. Then her landlord, the new landlord, Meek, gave her notice that the property was going up for sale. She'd have to vacate within 30 days. Her smug little blog entries about manifesting peace disappeared. So did the brunch photos. She even tried posting about the eviction, begging followers to support her. But I had already bought out her comment moderation team and PR contact. Her cries for help landed in a void. She didn't know it yet, but everything around her was fake. All of it built on sand I had started to pull away, grain by grain. Meanwhile, My father started driving Uber. The auto parts store I tanked was the only steady thing he had. When that failed, his debt ballooned. The same man who once told the court, Travis always seemed like he couldn't handle responsibility, now couldn't handle a shift longer than 3 hours without back pain. My sister? She'd invested in a clothing boutique that never opened. That's because the vendor I'd paid her deposit to didn't exist. I made sure of that. She was now $47,000 in debt with no product and no one returning her emails. I didn't deliver revenge like fire. I delivered it like fog. Slow. Creeping. I made sure each of them tripped without knowing what they'd stumbled over. Then one night, I got a call. Blocked number. I answered without speaking. A man's voice came through. Derek. Travis, he said. Man, are you okay? There was hesitation in his voice, like he was afraid I might hang up again. I didn't speak at first. I just listened. I know I messed up, he continued. I believed her. I believed everything Lena said. I didn't even ask you for your side. That's on me. Still, I didn't say a word. Let him sweat. Listen, people are saying something's happening. Like it's weird. Her brother lost his job. Your dad's store shut down. Your sister's crying over some scam vendor. Everyone's trying to figure out who's behind it. Some think it's karma. But I think he stopped. I could almost feel the tension through the phone. I think it's you, he said finally. And if it is, I just wanted to say I get it. I really do. And I'm sorry. I waited 5 seconds, then said, thanks for calling. Then I hung up. I didn't need his approval. I didn't want friendship. I wanted truth. And now, I had it clear as day. They were afraid. Not just of what they lost, but of who had taken it from them. And that's when I knew I was ready for the final move. It wasn't enough to make them stumble. I wanted to take back the moment that humiliated me in that courtroom. To flip the balance so fully that every time they saw my name, it wouldn't come with pity, but fear. So I began setting up one last play. A private foundation quietly registered in another city. A charity dinner, black tie, with a featured keynote speaker, philanthropist, investing in rebuilding communities destroyed by fraud and family betrayal. Me. The event would be invitation only. And guess who would get the golden tickets? Lena. My father. My sister. Her brother. They'd walk into a room I controlled, sit at tables I paid for, and listen to a speech that they'd think was for someone else until the reveal. Because I wasn't just going to haunt them from behind the curtain anymore. I was going to take the stage. The invitations went out in gold-trimmed envelopes with no sender information, just the title, The Restoration Gala, an exclusive black tie event hosted at a newly opened luxury venue downtown. I spared no detail. Custom lighting, private chefs, soft piano music, everything draped in elegance and mystery. My foundation's name, the Heart Initiative, was printed modestly at the bottom, just enough for them to miss it until it was too late. I knew they'd attend. People like them don't turn down glitz, especially when it promises access, connections, and, above all, attention. I watched from the security feed as they arrived, one by one. Lena was the first, dressed in a black gown like she was still the queen of something. Her posture screamed pride, but her eyes were scanning, probably hoping to charm a new investor or latch onto another man's success. My father came next, walking with a slight limp now, wearing a suit that looked one season too old. My sister showed up 10 minutes later with a fake laugh and a tighter dress than she used to wear when borrowing from Lena's closet. Her boutique had failed. She hadn't. Not yet. They sat at a table near the front, unaware of how close they were to the stage and to me. I stood behind the curtain, wearing a tux that cost more than their combined rent, rehearsing my breaths like a performer. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't scared. I was ready. This moment wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming the part of myself they tried to bury. The room quieted. The host gave a glowing introduction about a visionary entrepreneur who turned personal tragedy into community triumph. Then he said my name. There was a pause. I walked out under the lights, and they froze. Lena's jaw visibly clenched. My sister looked like she'd seen a ghost. My father sat still, expression unreadable, but I saw the flicker, the recognition, the realization. I smiled. Good evening, everyone. My name is Travis Hart, and tonight, I want to tell you a story. I didn't look at them directly. I didn't need to. I lost everything. A house. A career. A reputation. In the eyes of the people closest to me, I was nothing. I was blamed. Abandoned. Left behind by a court that listened to tears instead of facts. And yet, here I stand, not because I wanted revenge, but because I found something more powerful. I paused. The room leaned in. I found purpose. And I found fortune in the most unlikely way. A forgotten ticket. A stroke of chance. But that wasn't the real gift. The real gift was what it allowed me to see. Who truly stands with you when you have nothing. And who disappears the moment you fall. Lena shifted in her chair. I could hear her breathing from the stage. I created the hard initiative to give people like me a second chance. Those who've been destroyed not by strangers, but by those who once sat at their table. My voice didn't waver. It didn't rise. It cut. The applause when I finished was thunderous. Not because of the speech, but because every soul in that room felt the truth of it. My table stood empty, reserved for late arrivals who would never be seated. After the speech, I mingled. Carefully, casually. I walked past them like they were just another set of guests. Lena stood up first, grabbing my arm gently. Travis, what is all this? I looked at her, really looked at her. For the first time since the day she watched the judge hand her my life. It's everything you thought I'd never become, I said quietly. Her lips parted like she wanted to speak, but nothing came out. My father approached next, slower now, with that heavy breath of a man who'd been living on borrowed pride. You really did all this? He asked. I nodded. With no help. He looked down. I didn't know. You didn't ask, I replied. Then I turned to my sister. She said nothing. Just lowered her gaze. And I walked away. That was the moment. Not the speech. Not the money. Not the quiet revenge. That. Watching them realize I was no longer the man they used to know, but the one they never believed I could become. They came thinking they were attending someone else's event. Turns out, it was mine all along. The gala ended with slow applause and half smiles, mostly polite, some genuine. But there were 4 faces that didn't clap, didn't smile, didn't even stand. Lena, my father, my sister, and her brother all sat frozen in the same seats they'd proudly occupied hours earlier. It was poetic. They had walked into that ballroom expecting to network with the powerful. Instead, they watched the man they destroyed reveal he was the powerful. I didn't wait for the room to empty. I left through the back, coat slung over my shoulder, silent and satisfied. The game wasn't over, but the rules had changed. The next morning, the messages started coming in. Lena texted me first. No pleasantries, just a simple line. Please, can we talk? I didn't reply. She followed it up with a long thread about how confused she was, how she never stopped caring, how the divorce was complicated and manipulated by others. That phrase, manipulated by others, made me laugh out loud. She had staged the whole performance in court. I remembered every detail, her voice breaking, her tears, her family flanking her like a grieving widow, even though I was alive and watching them burn me in real time. If that was manipulation, it came straight from her own script. By noon, my father had emailed me. You've made your point, but we're still family. Blood is blood. That line stuck in my throat. Not because it moved me, but because it proved just how little he still understood. When I needed him, he gave me silence. When I begged him to hear me out during the divorce, he shook Lena's lawyer's hand like they were planning a barbecue. Now, he wanted to claim blood? That tie was severed the day he testified against me, nodding as my ex-wife told the court I was unstable and selfish. Then came my sister's message, the most desperate of all. Travis, I'm sorry. I didn't know what she was doing until it was too late. I was scared. Dad told me to stay out of it. Please believe me. They were unraveling. Not because I hurt them, but because they couldn't believe I didn't need them anymore. They had built their lives believing I would always be there, quiet, loyal, forgiving. The one who bailed them out, the one who picked up the phone, the one who paid the rent behind the scenes. And now that person was gone. Worse than gone, he was rich, free, and unreachable. That week, I bought the last piece of my plan. The house. My house. The same one the court had given to Lena, the one she had redesigned, paraded on Instagram, and turned into a temple of her so-called independence. It had gone on the market quietly after her eviction notice was finalized. I bought it through a proxy firm, no negotiations, full cash. Once the papers were signed, I sent her a simple note through the realtor. Keys can be mailed. You don't need to return anything. I already replaced it all. I knew she'd understand. You see, I wasn't just reclaiming a house. I was burying the past under fresh paint and hardwood floors. The closing triggered a ripple. Within 2 weeks, her credit tanked. She lost her sponsorships. The trainer brother she leaned on for support? I'd already bought out his gym chain, and the new owners didn't renew his contract. My sister's boutique space suddenly tripled in rent after I purchased the strip. My father's rideshare gig ended after I bought out the local franchise and flagged his name for client discomfort. Each one of them cut off, cornered, exposed. Not by public scandal, not by angry emails, but by consequence. They didn't lose because I attacked them. They lost because I walked away and built something bigger than their betrayal. One day, as I stepped into the house I now owned again, quiet, warm, with a dog sleeping by the fireplace, a new one, not Max, but just as loyal, I heard a knock at the door. I didn't answer. Through the window, I saw Lena standing there. Same fur coat she used to mock me for buying when we were married. She stood for a full minute, then turned and walked away. That was the moment I knew it was over. Not just the revenge, but the need for it. Because once you own everything they thought you'd never have again, your peace, your dignity, your power, you don't need to fight anymore. You just live. There's a kind of silence that settles when you've truly let go. Not the forced silence of bitterness, or the clenched teeth quiet you hold when you're trying not to explode, but a clean, open stillness. I felt it that morning as I sipped my coffee on the balcony of my new home. The same home she once posted online like it was her trophy. But now, there were no cameras, no filters, no followers. Just me, the sun, the breeze, and the deep, unmistakable peace of a man who didn't need applause to feel complete anymore. I hadn't responded to Lena's text in weeks. I hadn't answered my father's emails or my sister's teary voicemails. They still reached out from time to time, less frequently now, and with shorter messages. I knew they weren't sorry for what they did. Not really. They were sorry for the consequences. Sorry they lost their golden egg, their lifeline, the scapegoat they could use to feel superior. But I wasn't that person anymore. I had taken the pain, the betrayal, and the public humiliation and turned it into something they couldn't buy back, power earned in silence. One afternoon, I drove to the outskirts of town to visit a shelter I'd been funding under a different name. It was a modest building, new roof, fresh paint, warm meals served daily. A woman there named Gloria gave me a tour. She didn't know who I really was, just that I was the quiet man who signs the checks. She introduced me to a few residents. A man with 2 kids whose wife had left and taken everything. A nurse who'd been abandoned by her siblings after caring for their mother for 10 years. They spoke with the same hollow ache I once carried. I didn't tell them my story. I just listened. Because sometimes, listening is the victory. Later that week, I found myself walking downtown, past all the places that used to trigger something in me: rage, resentment, heartbreak. Lena's old cafe spot? Gone. My sister's boutique? Closed, windows covered with brown paper. My father's office? Converted into a check-cashing place. I didn't feel joy in their failure. I felt nothing. And that's when I knew I had won, not because they lost, but because I no longer needed them to lose for me to feel whole. The real revenge wasn't the repossessions, the silent business takeovers, or the orchestrated closures. The real revenge was thriving so loudly in silence that their lives became the echo chamber they tried to trap me in. A few months later, I received a handwritten letter, sloppy penmanship, no return address, but I knew the hand. My father. Travis, I don't expect you to read this. I don't even know if you'll see it. But if you do, just know that I was wrong. About you. About everything. I failed you as a father. I believed a version of you that never existed because it was easier than accepting I didn't really know my own son. I hope you're living well. I hope you found peace. I folded the letter and set it on the table without a word. There was a time when those words would have cracked me wide open. But now, they just floated in the air. Heavy, maybe, but not mine to carry anymore. You see, I had finally stopped looking back. There was no need. My life had become the kind of story they'd never be able to rewrite. I was no longer their victim, or even their villain. I was just gone, invisible to the version of the world they tried to trap me in, but fully present in the one I built with my own hands. I took one last drive that evening to the courthouse. Not to visit, just to pass it. I pulled up beside it, parked, and stared at the steps where I had once stood broken, alone, and stripped of everything. That man had died on those steps. The man sitting in the driver's seat now? He had learned not to rebuild what broke him, but to redesign the life that followed. And I did, in full. If this story spoke to you, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful narratives that remind us, sometimes, the best revenge isn't shouting back. It's building a life so full, so unshakable, that the people who doubted you are forced to watch from the outside.